Omani Foreign Minister Youssef bin Abdullah said he was optimistic Syria will cooperate before an Arab League meeting later this week. The plan calls for an end to the bloodshed, prisoner release, withdrawing troops from various cities, and beginning talks with the opposition and Arab monitors on the ground. GCC ministers also plan to discuss the backing of a controversial new port planned on Kuwait's maritime border with Iraq. Many politicians in Iraq complain it harms their port in Basra. U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta has signed a document officially ending the Iraq War. The latest batch of U.S. combat forces departed on Sunday morning, crossing into Kuwait. Over almost 9 years, about 4,500 U.S. soldiers and more than 100,000 Iraqis died, with over 1.5 million displaced. U.S. President Barack Obama said in his weekly address on Saturday that Iraq's future will now be in the hands of its own people.And the final convoy of U.S. troops has left Iraq and arrived in Kuwait, where they will stay until they are sent home for this Christmas. The exit on Sunday morning marks the completion of the U.S. military withdrawal from the country after a 9-year war that ended Saddam Hussein's regime. Matt Studdard takes a look.
Heading home for Christmas. As the sun rose over the desert on Sunday, trucks carrying soldiers and weaponry could still be seen streaming across the Iraq-Kuwait border. The US Army's 500-strong 3rd Brigade made the hour-long drive to Kuwait for a short stopover before returning to the US. Among them was US soldier Brittany Hampton.
I'm excited, I'm happy, I'm relieved, I'm glad it's over. I can't wait to tell them. I got the coin from General Austin, and I was like really excited. My dad's also in the military, so I'm like too anxious to tell them what happened and everything. So
the pullout opens a new phase of uncertainty for Iraq. Iraq's army now has full control over the country's security, some 10 days earlier than US President Barack Obama's December 31st deadline. On Thursday, US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta attended a flag-lowering ceremony at a military base west of the Iraqi capital Baghdad, marking the end of US military involvement.
And today, some 5 years later, and after a great deal of blood has been spilled by both Iraqis and Americans, the mission of an Iraq that could finally govern and secure itself has become real. The Iraqi army and police have been rebuilt, and they are capable of responding to threats.
There are now only 157 US soldiers left in Iraq. They'll be based at the US Embassy and will mainly be responsible for training. A small contingent of Marines has also stayed behind to protect the embassy compound. Panetta says the war has set Iraq on a path to democracy, but controversy still rages over the reasons given for the initial invasion in 2003. And the question now is whether or not the Iraqi security forces are up to the task of maintaining peace and stability in a country that's seen so much conflict and bloodshed through recent decades. Matt Stuttard, CCTV.
And we're heading to a short break here. Coming up next on our program. Home, cheap home. Housing prices continue to fall and more cities are following suit, says the National Bureau of Statistics. And easier access for all. We look at reforms in government-run hospitals as China aims to provide universal health care. Welcome back. We begin now with some welcoming news for the Chinese home buyers. Property prices for new houses are continuing to fall, and more cities are joining the trend. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Of all the 70 major cities monitored, housing prices in 49 dropped in November, and that's been 15 more than in October. In November of last year, only 4 cities saw price declines. And in other urban areas where prices are still rising, they are doing so at a slower pace. And this is the same for older properties, where more cities are seeing prices drop. The falling housing prices have led to the toughest sales for property developers and estate agents in years. But in Beijing, several agencies have come up with discounts and promotional plans to boost their business. However, despite their efforts, these tactics are not paying off, as Jie Bai finds out.
Once one of the most lucrative businesses, now many property agencies in Beijing are finding themselves in a rut, unimaginable just 1 year ago. Ren Qixing has been working for one of the capital's biggest property companies for years. He says the knock-on effect of the cooling measures is tremendous.
We lost a lot of customers this year. More than half of the buyers last year couldn't even qualify to buy a home, had the purchase limits been implemented then.
Business in Yahao last year stood at 15 billion yuan. So far this year, they've made only 10 billion yuan. The drop in sales has forced many developers to lower their prices. As well as offering discounts, some agencies promise to send a car as a gift for their buyers.
There are really a very limited number of potential buyers out there. Developers are doing anything they can to help win over customers. But on the other hand, they also need cash to keep afloat.
But people are still not buying.
Prices are still falling, and I believe it will continue to fall. I will wait for some time to buy a home.
In the same vein, investors with older properties for sale are lowering prices, trying to get houses off their hands quickly. But in a market where everyone keeps watching rather than buying, sales are stagnating. Jie Bai, CCTV.
In China launched its medical reform in 2009 with the goal of providing universal healthcare services to its 1.3 billion residents. Public hospitals are at the center of the country's health system. Currently, the hospital reform is still in its pilot stage. Li Nan reports what changes have been made in government-run hospitals over the past 3 years.
The queue's too long. Why are medical services so expensive? People have always been complaining about their experiences of seeing doctors in China, but in big cities like Beijing and Shanghai, the situation has been eased over the past few years. Many public hospitals have introduced telephone booking systems. Some even launch internet services for patients to book their appointments online. As one of the pilot cities, Beijing carried out telephone and internet booking solutions in July, providing alternative choices to help make appointment bookings more convenient. Over 70 local hospitals have joined the service.
I once made my clinic appointment online and came to see the doctor without queuing the next day. The internet booking is quite helpful.
Meanwhile, some patients still find it hard when they want to see a chief physician or go to top hospitals.
I chose to see a chief doctor last time, and I had to queue up very early in the morning to book his time slot.
The improvement on clinic bookings is only one part of China's healthcare reform. The government is also seeking for a more sustainable funding mechanism to make seeing doctors more affordable. Currently, around 90% of medical services in the country rely on public hospitals. Originally, these hospitals generate their incomes from drug sales, which has led to high medicine bills.
On one hand, we are making efforts to introduce the medical insurance system to wider areas and to provide more government subsidies on medical bills. On the other hand, we have established a basic medicine system with necessary drugs produced and distributed under government control. The average medicine price have dropped 30% in the past few years.
Despite the fast development, the country still has a long way to go to establish a high-standard medical care system. The current hospital reform is in the pilot phase and has only been applied to selected cities. More improvements need to be made to narrow the gap of medical conditions between large and small cities, as well as urban and rural areas. Li Nan, CCTV, Beijing.
And that's it for this edition of CCTV News. I'm Yusa. Bye for now.